Okay, welcome in everyone. Welcome to the Groover Club, another great webinar we have today for the month of August. Today we're really lucky. We have Jonathan Sherman here from Return Records. He's New York based. Really excited about this one. It's going to be about A&R, an area that's been true to me for a number of years. Been really lucky to work in the space. Really looking forward to seeing, the different viewpoints and touch points. A&R is an evolving space, between seeing live shows, gut reaction to A&R research to now the TikTok era. There's a lot to go into it. So this is going to be a fun one. Really excited to have Jonathan here. Jonathan, welcome in, and the floor is yours.
Hey, thanks so much, Eric. And yeah, it's such a pleasure to meet all of you. Thank you to Eric for the introduction and also for, allowing us to come speak. It's really, really exciting to do this kind of stuff. I find myself doing like a lot of these educational programs. Recently we did a songwriting camp about 3 weeks ago. We did our showcase at Mercury Lounge, the famed Mercury Lounge in New York City, and did one at our recording studio in Flatiron. It was very successful. We had artists from all over the world. We had some friends of mine from the major record labels that came over and talked about the future of A&R. And so this too is an area that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm really excited to engage. We've loved Groover. We've worked with Groover for many years. In fact, actually, Eric's colleagues, Thomas and Dorian, who started Groover in Paris, were one of my first calls when I first started Return Records, and I got the distribution deal with The Orchard. And we've been a strong partner of Groover for the last 4 or 5 years with them. So really excited to do this. My name is Jonathan Sherman. I am the CEO and founder of Return Records. We're a distributed label with The Orchard and Sony Music. A bit of background about me. I've been in the music industry for about 12 years now. I started as a music producer and a DJ, and then went into the music business side of things. I've also been a guest panelist for several major publications like EDM.com, EDM Identity. I was the co-founder of a major music industry advisory practice at one of the big 4 auditing firms, where I basically helped do the strategy deliveries for all the major record labels, most of the major DSPs, and some of the live performance venues. I also designed technology during that time that got amplified at the 2022 Super Bowl, and was one of the first examples of personalized and customized digital out-of-home entertainment, both for the music industry and for advertisers. Then spent a couple years at Sound Exchange, where I did music publishing, music licensing on the sound recording royalty side of things, and worked a lot with neighboring rights organizations as well as a variety of different publishers. And then my pet project for many years after kind of transitioning out of the DJ world has been really establishing Return Records, which I was always enamored by the great A&Rs and great record label owners like Rick Rubin and Barry Gordy and Clive Davis. And so I wanted to create really a Motown for the digital era. Our initial scoping discussions with The Orchard and Sony Music were primarily around how do we create a Motown experience in the digital world. And as we've moved out of the pandemic, it's been more focused on taking the Motown model and incorporating that into the digital audio workstation and the modern music production environment here in New York City. What's kind of cool about our record label, and I'll get into it as I start the presentation, is we are very multidisciplinary. So we work across music, fashion, and art, as well as brand activations. And not only did I found this record label, but my label is also a co-founder in a large fashion production company that does some of the world's largest independent fashion shows in Miami, in New York, Toronto, Houston, as well as Paris and Dubai. So it's really exciting to be able to kind of cut across different artistic mediums. I'm going to kind of share this presentation today. This is really talking about the rise of the smart A&R. And, I'm going to kind of attempt to define in today's webinar, what is a smart A&R? How is it important to, how does it enable artists to stand out? How do labels use smart A&R tools and techniques to attract new artists? what are some key case studies, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we implement it here with Return Records, and just go through some key takeaways, as well as Q&A, which will be where we spend the majority of our time for today's webinar.
Perfect.
So let's dive into it. So I want to first talk a little bit about the history of A&R. And it was really interesting because when I was sort of going through artist and repertoire teams, I think a lot of people, like, they don't really understand what an A&R is. I mean, like, how many of you, like, by show of hands and the icon thing, how many of you guys actually, like, know what an A&R does? Let's do a quick poll here and see. I don't know if I can see all of you, but there we go. We got a couple of raised hands. So it's interesting. An A&R was really, at its core, an A&R is really a talent scout for the major record labels. If you think of a major record label like a VC firm or I don't know, an entity that helps support artists financially and in terms of marketing and live entertainment, A&Rs are really talent scouts. But what's really interesting is that A&Rs are really there to reduce the risk for the record label, right? In my personal experience, and Eric can probably attest to this as well, oftentimes when you start a record label, like, you have no clue what you're doing, and a lot of record labels tend to scale up very quickly before they tend to really narrow into their sound and define what their genre is. So looking at A&Rs, they really provide risk mitigation and create pipelines as well as market fits. I know some A&Rs are talent managers, some are producers. There's a whole host of different A&Rs, but that is really what it is at its core. For artists, A&Rs are really meant to be connectors. I mean, when I, embody the role of an A&R, my primary role is to get artists the right resources. I'm not necessarily looking at, like, hey, I'm looking at, would this person be a good fit for the label and what we do, but I'm also looking at, like, how can I help this person? How can I help make their artistry great, help get them to the right resources, help build an ecosystem and a team around them. A lot of previously A&Rs were highly built on gatekeeping. A lot of them came from the major record labels and kind of provided the most direct pipeline to specific tools and technologies. Nowadays, A&Rs are really more about data. They have to be data driven. They have to be very savvy. They have to be community builders, and they have to really, balance their gut feeling with specific analytics, which we'll dive into in a second. And then I just put some of the most, like, famous A&Rs out there. I mean, these are people that you know very well. People like Clive Davis, Barry Gordy, Rick Rubin, etc. Next slide. So what is a smart A&R? So when I was looking at A&Rs and the history of A&Rs, I was really looking at, like, how do A&R teams operate over the years and what makes them different now from earlier. And I think the first thing to note is that A&Rs today are really about allocating resources efficiently and really getting the artist ready. To be honest, I would say about 95% of the artists that I work with are artists that have the potential to be signed to a major record label or to blow up, but aren't necessarily artists that are there yet in their careers. And so as an A&R, you're really a fiduciary to help them get to those next steps. If you think about it like a corporate ladder, you're trying to get them from step A to step B to step C so they can then reach step D. A&R teams really enforce accountability and preparedness. I think a huge responsibility of A&Rs today is not just about giving them creative direction, but also helping them understand those building blocks that they need to be able to get to the next stage and keep them organized and on task. And A&Rs use a whole heck of a lot of different tools. I know I use these so many times in my daily work. I'm sure Eric and many of you do as well. Things, you'll find stuff on Spotify, TikTok, dashboards. If you're not using them, chart metrics, sound charts, even Groover itself can be great platforms for finding emerging artists. You're doing a lot of analytics and forecasting. So what does this mean in practical terms? I actually have built cost models for artists. I'm not saying I would build a cost model for every artist if you're looking to be an A&R and get into building a record label. But like, if you really believe in an artist, you have to sit there and really think through, like, what is your return on investment over a 3 to 5 year period? If you're not thinking about it, certainly the distributors, like our distributor, The Orchard, is thinking about it, and they will ask us. Qualitative feedback. I go to I live in New York City and work in New York City, like go to a lot of shows, a lot of live events. And oftentimes I'm not just looking at like how the artist is as a performer or what their music is. I'm also looking at like what feedback they're being given by their fans. And, is this the right fit for specific, venues or specific genres, etc. And these two are big ones: community and collaboration. One of the biggest pieces of feedback I get from artists that I talk to, and one of the areas I've seen a lot of research done, artists today, they don't really need distribution. They don't necessarily need publishing. They can do it on their own if they're savvy enough. There's enough tutorials in Groover and others to help them. Live performances, they can pitch their own live performances. Even marketing and advertising. Spotify this year launched an advertising platform. The biggest demand is really community building. It's the ability to connect with other artists and creatives to build new work. Oftentimes when artists hit a roadblock, they come to record labels and communities to be able to do that. And that goes to the last piece, which is distribution and growth. Some labels are very savvy at breaking markets where artists may not necessarily have access. Our label is very good at doing that, like the fashion and brand activation space, for example. So some may have specific niches that allow them to provide access to markets that artists wouldn't otherwise. So how can you stand out? So the first thing is that you can just receive direct inquiries. We get probably maybe a half dozen of these a day. Then, if your SEO is good on your webpage or on your press kit, like you can oftentimes just get like direct inquiries, maybe through social media or email. The second is referral platforms. This is where I don't want to, my own horn or Groover's own horn or others and, have this be a public service announcement, but I will graciously do that. And that Groover is a great platform for this. Groover, Muso Soup, Submit Hub. There's a lot of questions about Submit Hub often, but Submit Hub, Label Radar, Ed Brew's team over at Beatport. These are really great platforms for finding demos. And to be honest, we've sourced some of our best artists from Groover and platforms like Label Radar. And lastly, social media. This is probably a given, but if you're not on social media, you really are missing a large portion of your smart A&R strategy. Social media is where everything's at. I am not the biggest fan of social media. I would prefer to go back to an old way of doing things where I got the CD or cassette. But it is a reality that now most artists are on social media, and that is a huge way of finding them.
Yeah, and just to chime in, I feel like in a way it's really the stage, right, for artists to broadcast their stuff out, and whether it's performing or speaking, a unique point of view or perspective, like social media is really powerful in that way. I know it's tricky and it's another job. That's what a lot of artists always say. They're trying to create music and be in that headspace, and it is a totally different headspace, but it is a way for you to kind of jump up and get noticed for sure.
Oh, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Eric. And it's so funny because, trust me, I love it when artists will hand me a USB or a CD. But the reality is our technology platforms have evolved from those mediums, and it is just harder for a label and an A&R team to be able to get your music in front. If you want to do it like as a gimmick, it's kind of fun. I've done it with some A&R before, and some of my friends have like commented how unique it is.
Yep.
But ultimately, they'll just be like, "Hey, I really appreciate the effort. Like, this seems cool. Like, can you just send me the link to the music?" And then it's
Yeah.
like, all right, like we're going back to the way of doing it, the default.
I have two funny stories there. An artist I'm
Yeah.
working with right now, he's in LA, and he was trying to get the attention of a label, and he was talking to them for a bit, and they kind of ghosted him. And he actually took a rubber chicken and put a USB in it and like threw it over their fence or something.
Yeah.
And then they responded after that because they like really appreciated that. And then just to go back all the way to like, you know, those historic A&Rs that you have, Clive Davis and stuff like that. Like I was really lucky to work with Seymour Stein, who signed Madonna and Ice-T, and you know he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. And actually, Richard Gottehrer, you know, who runs the Orchard, him and Seymour were partners back in the day. They first started Sire together, and what they used to do, they would call it like shopping at the bargain bin.
Yep.
They were going across the pond, like into Europe and stuff, meeting with international teams at like Universal and Decca and stuff like that. And there was this pile of demos that they didn't want to sign. So Seymour and Richard would go through those demos, and to get back into it, to get more meetings, they actually would bring New York cheesecakes and mail the cheesecakes out. And it created this demand where they were like, oh, those are the cheesecake guys. Or like after every meeting, they'd be like, we'll see you again. Can you bring the cheesecakes? And it was just, you know, a way of getting in the door. So those things can work. So just keep those in mind. They're little tactics, you know, that are appreciated for sure.
Yeah, most definitely. I agree. One of my favorite tactics that I sometimes give artists is like write a handwritten note, and literally like if you're local to New York City or LA, like go and like drop it off. Like I've seen this actually work sometimes. Like the physical ability to be like, hey, here is my record. Here's 2 sentences about it in a handwritten note can show that you really care. Like at the end of the day, just like Eric and I, like these A&R guys at the major labels, like they are inundated with this stuff. And what they want to see is that like you're not just like clicking a button, that you actually like care, and that you've like put in as much care and time and effort into how you're going to present the record as much as how you've made it, you know? And I think that's a big piece. Wanted to kind of touch here on like how labels attract artists, because I think
also
this is
really quick. I was just thinking of this, Jonathan. Sorry to interrupt, but even like when you are signed, if you do get signed, now you're competing with a ton of other artists, right? So I had a band, Delta Ray, and they did exactly what you were saying, a handwritten note. And what they did was they also put it with a gift for the holiday, like a jelly or something they had made. And they passed it around to all the team members inside of Warner. And that act actually like activated a lot of interest. They were like, oh, this is so nice. No one ever does this for us. And they definitely in that new year got a lot of attention and support just from that hand note. So it goes a long way.
Yeah. I know Mike Kahn and and Brad Nevin has said that like Mass Appeal does this a lot. Like Nas's team will do this at like the Orchard, and it like goes a long way. It really makes an impression, which is great. No, that's a really good point. And this is a slide that I was thinking a lot about when I wanted to deliver this webinar. Like we are kind of done with the like 360 deals are part of the business, but we're kind of done with the whole like the record label takes all situation. A lot of good deals to get good artists as an A&R or a label or as a production house. A lot of artists will sign if you're willing to really collaborate with them and find terms that are equitable for both parties. And that sometimes means having to give something up, but it goes a lot further. Like if I make a 50-50 deal with an artist and or even, you know, a deal that's even more favorable to the artist, but I have that artist for a longer period of time, the return on investment for that, particularly in terms of exposure, potential marketability, and signature with a major label, can be much more, can have a much higher ROI in the end than simply trying to go for the quick buck at the beginning. So I think this fair deals piece is a really critical one if you want to be a smart A&R, because part of it is knowing when to push and part of it is simply knowing when to walk away or when to step back and realize that it's about the bigger picture. It's not just you. And that can really go a long way in helping to sign artists. The second piece is transparency. This is like the number one thing that artists really care about. One of the biggest comments that artists give me a lot, which is why we've grown so quickly, so fast, and why the Orchard still, I think, keeps us around, is because we're transparent. Like we don't give gimmicks. We're not like, hey, we're gonna do this and then pull it back. And if we do, that's just us reflecting on ourselves of ways that we as a label and A&R team need to get better. Ultimately, like if you're transparent with the artist, that ability to build trust will, result in long-term success, because if they can trust you, then they can trust the label, and they will then be able to take directions and pivot with you as you need to shift your business. And the last is career development. I mean, this is a huge piece. A&Rs started as career developers. You gave a couple of great examples, Eric, and like this continues to be the core of what A&R does. There really isn't a position like it in the music industry where you are so keen on really helping artists grow, develop, and build their brand and their sound in their community. So just a couple quick case studies. I kind of looked through some of the major artists that are coming through the scene and some innovative ways that A&Rs have been able to break them. I thought this might be a good slide to kind of really talk about some examples that you can use in your own cases. It is really about aligning readiness and multidisciplinary support. For Billie Eilish, this was really cool. She had a couple of key songs that she released, but initially when she released them, I mean, this is very similar to like DJs or Kygo did this very famously, as well as Avicii actually in the beginning days, with Laid Back Luke. Like she put her records up on SoundCloud and then just really built a strong community presence around that sound on SoundCloud. And it immediately got the attention of Interscope and UMG. We are a little bit past that in the cycle where music distribution now, it's so readily accessible that it's hard to get that exposure. But at the time when she was breaking through, that was really innovative because not a lot of people were using SoundCloud to really do that type of A&R work. And the lessons that she learned from working with her A&R team to do that really went a long way in how she's been able to structure her artistic career. Bad Bunny, another big example. Medellin is one of the hottest beds of music right now globally. If you know anything about world politics, in addition to having a career in music, I've also had a long-standing career in international affairs and technology. Colombia is a major market. It went through a number of years of civil war, then the cocaine crisis. It is now really building out of that, and Bad Bunny was able to really capitalize on that and work with teams in South America from his roots in Puerto Rico and the Caribbean islands to really help build those relationships both in Medellin and Miami. Dua Lipa, I think Dua Lipa is this great example of, and Eric and I probably see a lot of these in New York City. New York City, LA, and Nashville are famous for signing artists that have just come so close, but not far enough. We did a showcase in Mercury Lounge, and Lady Gaga performed so many times at Arlene's Grocery and Mercury Lounge, and oftentimes she would get approached by A&Rs, but not for her own music. It was mostly to write music for others. And it wasn't until Troy Carter, of course, found her and really invested in her that she became a global superstar. But Dua Lipa was very much the same way. Like she operated under the radar in London and provided a lot of persistence in terms of collaborating with artists, doing remixes, and building her community. And that really helped her grow to global startup. And then the last one I would also put here is Post Malone. I mean, you know, Post Malone was really great at being able to build a global following, a fan base following on social media. And Republic and Warner saw that and were then able to really capitalize on that. And I'm sure Eric, you might have more information about that. But you know, that is a great example of where artists are really, if they can build that virality through community building and constant engagement, it really will launch their careers.
Yeah, real quick, Dua Lipa almost got dropped at Warner. So it was cool to see the patient development there. That really is true. She was on the verge of being dropped, I was told when I was in the building, and I forget what song it was, but then it took off and you know, they were like, whoa, we might actually have something here. So you know, patience, it's really time, you know, more than anything with an artist. I've, you know, been involved. The label that I worked at was a smaller imprint of Warner Brothers Records. So we were almost like a scouting hub and we had to be early on stuff. So like you said, with your deals and stuff, being nimble, we had much smaller deals, but they were very fair, you know, options kicked in and things like that. But sometimes, you know, the artists were signed too soon and you're up against the bigger artists and they're getting all the attention. So it's really time more than anything and patience.
Yeah, I agree. And one more thing I'll say about Dua Lipa is, you know, I have to constantly remind a lot of artists that like Leonard Cohen wrote Hallelujah at 42 years old. Like your time is never, it's, you know, Diane Warren didn't really start writing songs until her 40s and 50s. Like it really does take a long time. Pharrell was in the industry for like 15 years from the time he was a teenager until he really hit his stride. Like Jay-Z, same kind of deal. So it really does take time. Like artists that, when I look at an artist and I think about growth potential, I have to be very honest in saying that if an artist is under 10 years in the industry, there's always a question in the back of my mind of like, what is missing or what could be added, what could be improved? Because after, you know, there's that famous book by Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers. It's like after those 10,000 hours, like you get an understanding of who that artist is, what their profile looks like, and what their success potential is. You know, under that, there are unicorns and there are definitely exceptions, but that's about how long it takes. It really does take about a decade to really hit your stride. So if you're meeting an artist that is having a growth potential early on in their decades-long career, you know, they may be the right artist to be able to sign to your production company or your A&R team or your label. But just ask yourself, like, what's next or what's missing or where can there be improvement? Because I think that's a good metric.
Really great point too, because like Billie Eilish appears to be a unicorn, right? But her brother Phineas was around for 10 plus years. You know, he was in bands and stuff like that. And he really, you know, if you look at it, he was the machine to really get her going with songwriting and production. So great point.
Yeah. And I just wanted to highlight here, like some of the things like our team at Return Records has done a little bit differently. You know, we are based in the heart of New York. We're in a state-of-the-art recording studio. We're distributed by the Orchard and Sony. But I think the biggest piece is like having that tech background. We're really focused on like using what's been done in the past to chart the future. The three things that are near and dear to my heart are like data-driven approaches, using analytics. It is a key piece. I know a lot of people, you know, hate on it, and I understand why. To be honest, I really do. Like I get the whole apprehension around AI, around data. Unfortunately, it's not going away. It's only improving. And so I think ways that we can figure out to like really build with it and not see it as a hindrance, but see it as an advantage, I think will help us all go along a lot further. We're out of the pandemic, and the two biggest demands right now by artists, particularly those that are DIY, is they want to perform, they want to show their music, they want to connect with audiences. You know, there's a huge gap right now in Gen Z culture around connectivity with others, and performances and live events allow them to do that. And community. A lot of artists feel very siloed. One of the amazing things about production and the advances in software and the advances in music is we've been able to create opportunities where what took an artist, an entire team of producers in a recording studio with a lot of expensive analog equipment, can now be done in a matter of hours on their laptop. But the flip side of that is that a lot of artists have lost the ability to connect and the ability to have life experiences that can help them write that music. So they're able to make good music. Like, it's very technically sound in music. Like, we get this a lot. I'm sure Eric does the same. Like, it's good technical music. Like, I don't have any arguments around, hey, this beat is off. Hey, this this timestamp doesn't align. Hey, this vocal doesn't align. But it just has no soul. Like, it's kind of lifeless. And that's where community can really come into play and help to build that relationship. So with that said, I'm gonna, kind of highlight the key points here, and then we can open it up for questions. I think the biggest piece when I think about smart A&R and the ability to find, to enable labels to find your music is like, share your story, like, be authentic, figure out who you are, and really like tap into that. I had an artist recently that came all the way from Brisbane, Australia to our songwriting camp. And her story really resonated with us. And because of that, she fit in so well, having known nobody or having really a base point for the community. And her performance was excellent. And it really came to show that, if you are authentic, if you find your story and can be authentic, you can really make a hallmark in a great community. Be consistent. We talked about Dua Lipa. I think that's a great example, Eric. Like, Dua Lipa, Katy Perry, these other great songwriters that wrote for other people for many years before breaking out stars. Like, consistency and perseverance is what ultimately gets you in this industry. It's not becoming the greatest streaming person on Spotify. It's not having sold out shows at major stadiums. That comes from consistency. And consistency is really key, and is one of the key things that a lot of A&Rs look for when they look at new artists. Engage your community. This is such an important point, and something I've made a lot throughout this presentation. Like, the biggest demand right now, I will repeat, is live performances in community. That's what people want. They want to connect. They have a lot of the technology tools available at their own disposal at a cheap cost, and with AI, that's only going to get cheaper to do. They don't need the next great distribution platform or the next great plugin. They need community. That's what will really get their music going from one end to the next. Show up. Again, I've seen amazing artists that have had incredible streaming numbers on Spotify that, I'm sorry, just like, they're not the right artist for us. And I've been criticized in the industry a lot by my peers for walking away from deals simply because they just didn't fit in with our vibe and our community, even if they were massive streaming artists. Just because they're great streamers doesn't mean they can really carry your team and your label to the next level. And lastly, remain accountable. I think it is my personal opinion, but so not an industry opinion, that artists that really come with like a certain level of precision, cleanliness, professionalism, and reliability. I think reliability is the biggest piece. Those are the artists that you want to work with. It's not about aesthetic. It's not about whether they're from hip hop or R&B or EDM or pop music. It's about how they carry themselves. And if you find artists that carry themselves really well, those are the artists that are going to stick by you. They're going to be professional. They're going to stay on top of things. And yeah, they may not have like the most streamers or followers or whatever, but they're the ones that will make great music and build great communities, and that's what you want. So one last plug, I really want to stress this. And don't worry, I didn't get paid to do this. Like, I genuinely believe this. Groover is a really good platform for this. I've used, Groover, Eric, Apolline, Thomas Dorian. We have a great relationship. We're having a songwriting camp coming up in October, and I'm hoping to work with the team to have our submissions start going through that. They've done it for Antisocial Camp with Danny Ross and a couple others. And it's just a great platform to connect with other artists, find new talent, and really break new boundaries. So continue to use Groover. It is a really great platform. And I just don't just say that because I got invited here. Like, I genuinely believe that. I've been using it for 4 years, and it's been one of the greatest returns for our label. So with that, I'll hand it back to you, Eric, and I'm happy to take questions and kind of go through any specific points that you guys want to discuss today.
Yeah, thanks so much. I mean, great analysis, and so true. You know, everything resonated with me, and I've been in the trenches, and it's so true. You know, it's the game changes every couple of years. You know, like I said earlier, between the data and the gut, there's still that balance. But it's about, you know, working with smart artists. It really is. Like, a lot of the artists, if not all of the ones that I've worked with, I'm still genuinely friends with, and like, you know, they're just good people, and those are the people that you want to work with. It's tough to find that sometimes in the business, but when you do have that like stickiness, it's very tangible, and you can kind of tell. So great stuff. And Groover, again, I work here as well, but like, the whole reason I got into Groover, I was a curator, and I found an artist that I ended up signing to a Swedish like record label that I worked at. And at that point, I started really paying attention to Groover and realizing there were some really great artists and potential for the platform. So, and that was, you know, 3 or 4 years ago. So super cool to see the evolution and growth. And yeah, we're happy to have artists as well, you know, in the platform that are here and cooperative, and you know, we're a tool to help you guys. So we're grateful.
No, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more, Eric. And I'm looking at the chat here. So my friend John had a great question here.
Nice.
And I love this question, John, because this is something that really inspired me a couple of years ago. So, you know, will.i.am and the team at Black Eyed Peas had like several A&Rs that they worked with over the years at multiple different labels. And one of them, actually, funny enough, found me not on Groover, but like a similar platform when I was just a small budding DJ. And he happened to live out in Frederick, Maryland. And I remember his name was Tareen Wright. He's since retired, but I remember Tareen saying something to me that I'll never forget. And it goes along with John's point here in the chat, which is, you know, as an artist, you got to have stuff to actually write about. You have to have stuff to actually make music about. And you can't do those things unless you have experiences. And this is actually one of the questions I get so often by artists, not from New York City or LA or London, some of the creative hubs, but artists in like small towns or like even, you know, medium-sized cities. Like I was born in Boston, but I grew up in Maine before moving down to Washington, D.C., where I went to undergrad and grad school and started Return Records, and then moved it here to New York 2.5 years ago. It's like, how do you stay inspired to be able to create music? And I always say the same thing that Tareen says, which is, gotta live life. Sometimes you have to take a break from music in order to make music. You know, you have to actually go out there and live your life and, you know, do the things that you love doing or that you're passionate about doing in order to actually write music and be creative to then help build that next great music. You know, I was listening to like, you know, Bryan Adams' song Summer of '69 came on like Spotify this morning. And I'm like thinking about the song, right? Like, obviously there's a lot of inundation there, but like, you know, I think about like the lyrics of that song. Like, he had to live his life. He had to go out, hang out, have breakups with girls, do all that to like be able to write about his summer that he wanted to celebrate. You know, that's how it has to be. You know, that's sometimes you gotta like go live life to like make great music. And I think that's actually a great question that you also bring up, John, about how to stay inspired. So one way I do it, we have this awesome songwriting camp that our label has started, the Electric Soul Songwriting Camp. It was a really great way to inspire artists. In fact, we're moving from our current recording studio in Flatiron. We're going to be moving to the famed music building to John's studio next month. And that's in large part due to the fact that we had so many artists that were just inspired to write music after the songwriting camp that like at some point we had these like 7, 8, 9-person songwriting sessions. And it was great. Like we had multiple different singers, instrumentalists, and the music that has come out of that has actually been really, really rewarding and very inspiring. And a lot of that just comes from like connecting with artists. So I think songwriting camps, two, I think, live performances. I book a lot of shows, and I always like to say, ways to test artists in terms of building their strength and building their resilience and building their confidence is by going out there and getting on stage. And the last piece is by being multidisciplinary. So like I said about, being able to do other things. Unfortunately, I mean, look, everybody has their own opinion on this, but unfortunately in 2025, music is not always about music. Eric, you and I have probably encountered several artists that are like TikTok, Instagram influencers or fashion show people or visual artists that want to be in music. It's not just about making music anymore. Like we are all on this call because we love and care about music, but there are a lot of artists out there that are more, they have an image and they more make music. And so what I would say there is like, find a platform for those people. Not all of them are going to be great artists. That is very true. They're not going to have the passion or the dedication or resilience that we do. But what they can do is they can do a couple of things. So first off, they can provide marketing and branding inspiration, which is great for musicians that don't necessarily know how to do that. Second thing is that when put into a community or collaborate, they often become much more able to really engage their full potential. And so I try to find ways to like get them features or collaborations or remixes, because that is a way to get them engaged and keep them involved in the community. Yeah, Eric, I don't know if you want to speak on that.
Yeah, super on point. I think you nailed it. So I'm in total agreement. Yeah.
There's another question here. What about artists that don't want to perform on stage? Not into that, but let's say that they do make very good melodic electronic music. Are they on their own and labels wouldn't ever be interested in them? No, absolutely not. No, definitely not. It's actually really cool. I'm working on a project for another job that I have where I'm a tech lead at a big international organization that's actually based around integrating music into one of the world's largest conference spaces. And we're working with, I'm on calls several times a week with the major publishers, Universal Music Publishing Group, Warner Chappell, and Sony Music Publishing. And they now have platforms where like artists can just basically go and, license their music to those platforms and have that music just become as valuable in terms of streaming and licensing as you might have on a DSP. And you don't ever have to perform doing that. I think one of the beauties actually of the advances in music production is nowadays there are so many ways that musicians can make music without ever having to perform. So I definitely do not think you are limited if you don't want to perform. In fact, I would actually argue that there are some artists where they are much better off not performing than others. One of my dad's favorite bands was Steely Dan and Talking Heads. And actually Steely Dan was very famous for releasing music and like never going on tour. And that was like kind of an odd thing in the 80s and 90s. But now like there are so many artists that do that that are still super successful. So I would say definitely lean on the publishing side though. This is where I could sort of see a divergence in the industry over the next couple of years, is that distribution will be for folks that want to be marketed, branded, and perform live. Publishing will really become the home of artists that really just want to make music and license their content and not necessarily want to like become a brand or a recording artist themselves. I don't know, Eric, maybe you have more.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think like music libraries and stuff like that are a good outlet for, those types of artists. It's definitely on the publishing side. I think obviously performance, like as an electronic, if you're a DJ, that is very important. If you're just more of like a beat maker producer, then I think the publishing side makes a ton of sense. And then I was just thinking about the first question you asked, and just not to go back to it, but I remembered with the inspiration, Seymour had actually told me a story once of Ice-T, who had like terrible like writer's block. And there was this Calypso festival that Seymour had gone to. And
Yeah.
like the next year he took him down there, and that inspired, like, I forget which album it was, but yeah, it even happens to the major label artists. So travel, getting out there, living your life, like you said, those are always the great inspirations. So I definitely
Yeah.
encourage that. But yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, that's a super solid point, Eric. And I want to go to a point that Russell gave, Russell Smith.
Yeah.
I've been through that break from a performing artist, years as a CPA, and now just focusing on songwriting. I produce demos and stream them all on all sites. How do I get these in front of the right eyes and ears of established artists that might want to record my songs? This is a great point. So I'm going to tee this question up for this exact platform, Groover. Not gonna lie, like, that's what this platform is for. It's actually kind of funny because when I recently caught up with Dorian, Eric, and him and I were kind of chatting about this. Like, the platforms that began this sort of this DIY submission model, like the music blog, Submit Hub, Jason's group, they were really Indie Shuffle. They were really geared on this idea that, like, you gotta kind of the gatekeeping aspect. You gotta go through these platforms to make it on the major labels or to make it. But the thing is, Russell, like, that's exactly what Label Radar and Groover and these things do anyways. So what actually is like really useful, that's maybe like 1 or 2% of what what platforms like Groover do. What's actually really useful for the other 98% is more of the collaboration piece and the ability to actually like find music to then be able to collaborate with others. Groover is a submission platform, but I can't tell you how many times I get Groover submissions where I'm like, we would never sign this artist, but like, I have this instrumentalist that needs a lick, and this would be like the perfect artist to like collaborate with my instrumentalist. Like, that's what these platforms are for. So I definitely would encourage you, and again, this is not because I'm doing this webinar, I genuinely believe this. Like, I would encourage you to use Groover. Like, use Groover, Label Radar, these other platforms. That's what they're there for. 98% of their business is literally collaborating and cross-pollinating. Yeah.
And I think even to that point, like, that's a big part of the Groover Club that we have that I help run. And we have so many artists in this platform, and the forum that we use, it's the Circle platform, which is very similar to like a Facebook group. And you can see all the different artists. You can see their types of genres. There's producers, there's mixers, there's engineers in there. And it's a great, kind of house for everyone to get together and collaborate, and they can message each other and stuff. So the Groover Club is definitely growing, and I see a ton of potential for that, for community and for this, like the songwriting, networking, all that stuff. So yeah. 100%.
I think George had a question.
We have George.
Yeah, is that me, Jorge?
Oh, Jorge. Sorry.
It is George in English.
Sorry.
So I don't want to be like bragging or anything. I just want to state the facts. I did it like with $250, 3 campaigns, and I got incredible reviews. One record label from Spain said that I can make it as far as I wanted in the music industry. One record label from Colombia said that in my genre, reggaeton, it sounds like I made a classic. One top producer for a different song from Brazil said that he thinks I could get a international music award for the cultural contribution of my music. And then the sync market was really raving about it in LA and Brazil. And I'm like stuck. Like, I don't know what to do with this information. That happened like maybe 8 months ago. I received like 3 publishing deals through Groover, but I don't think that that's what I want to do. I feel like I need I don't know what else to do. I feel like even if I do another campaign in Groover with better songs that I've produced since then, if they give me similar reviews, I don't know what I'm going to be able to do. So I'm trying to figure out if I get like the top type of reviews from the music industry in Groover, like what are the next steps for me?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a very complex question. It first off really depends on. So one thing that I've heard a lot of folks talk about is that there's really no genres among Gen Z. There may be no genres, but there are moods. There are, types. There are kind of communities, and I would really try to figure out like what are those target communities or groups or moods or genres where you want to be. I kind of see it as this, like when you're looking for a new job, like you know, if you were to just send out resumes to the entire world, like you would get a lot of rejection. You might get a couple of interviews, but you would get a lot of rejection. And you would oftentimes kind of feel like, oh, hey, like these interviews for this company are the only place that I'm going to be able to go because these are the only guys that are calling me back. When in reality, like that's not actually what's happening. It's just that you're like basically spraying and praying so wide, and you haven't really figured out yet like what that focus is. And as once you figure out what that focus is and that story that you want to tell, then it's much easier to be like, okay, I want to go to this place. I want to do this. Let me find somebody in that company. Let me reach out to them. Let me get a referral. Let me talk to the HR person. And you start to actually make headways to the places that you want to go to because you now have a very clear plan in mind. If you're getting a lot of interest, but you're not getting a lot of return, this is a question I get often. I actually got this question recently from an artist from our songwriting camp that asked me the same thing. And what I said to her was that you have to go back and think about your story. What is the story that you want to tell? Like, how do you actually want to present yourself in the music industry? Because that's going to help you understand where you need to go next. It's amazing what you've done, and you've gotten such incredible responses from across the industry. But now you're in the driver's seat, Jorge. Like now it's time for you to really figure out like, okay, what do I want? What is going to make me feel happy? Because if you do everything that everybody asks, there's going to be something inside your heart that says like, this doesn't really feel that right. And sometimes veering down those paths can have a lot more detrimental impacts long term than just like being narrow, sticking with your story, and like going with what's in your gut. So first off, congratulations. That's really awesome news and like amazing stuff. Second, you now got this interest. Now figure out where you want to take it and how you want to go with it. It's really about stopping spreading wide and thinking narrow. That's how I would approach it. Great question.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys for this platform, also for the Q&A and the connection you're making with us listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great question. We have DeGrazia Krebs. Thanks for the seminar. What first steps would you recommend for an artist that wants to enter in the world of sync licensing? What is the best strategy to find the first leads? Do you do that with your label? If yes, could you give us a few examples of how you started? Thank you. Yeah, sync is like such a difficult space. So I kind of put this in the category of two buckets. There are two types of really sync. And again, this is going to be very broad based. So if you'd like to do a deeper dive, like I'll put my contact information here just on the next slide. Just email me and we can walk through your specific scenarios and the email address here. So first, I would say there's the commercialization, there's the commercialized music, and there's like really the music license for film and television. In a nutshell, music license for film and television is all relationship based, and it's based on music placement, and it's really based on music supervisors for film, television studios, social media platforms, etc. To really do this, you have to have the right relationships, and you almost have to like be in the right circles. That is actually something that Return Records does, and that's something the Orchard does really well. And we have a great relationship with Sharon Masters, who's the VP of Sync Licensing. I literally just emailed her the other day, and we can kind of walk through maybe a specific scenario offline on that. But in that case, like her team basically just scouts the Orchard distribution hubs and looks at records that are, maybe popping online, maybe they have some interest, maybe they have some revenue generation. and then we'll reach out for specific sync opportunities if those are afforded. Again, that is based on certain moods, certain genres, certain criteria, certain keywords, and it's also really relationship based. So you have to really know the right people. In order to build those relationships, I spent a lot of time on LinkedIn, and I can tell you that that is still an area where, despite an expertise in publishing administration, we're still constantly learning and evolving. The other is like the commercial aspect, and this is something I really want to highlight. A couple of years ago, we signed an artist called Jay Will, and he was like very good at getting music placed in like commercials and companies, and he did that mainly through like Epidemic Sound, Soundstripe, and a lot of these platforms that basically just like onboard large swaths of catalog and then license out that catalog in kind of like a Splice. If you guys use Splice for music production, it's like a very similar type of experience. You basically go online, and if you're a client that's looking for music, you'll search through based on certain criteria, certain moods, certain topics, and then you'll download that music and put it into your content. And depending on the reports of usage that come from that music, you'll then be paid out a certain number of royalties. Those are really like the two ways to do sync licensing. Like I said, one is very relationship based. It's very tricky. It oftentimes involves knowing the right people and being in the right place, right time. Another is more cut and dry. It's less, initial monetary return, but it is a great way of getting your music synced and being able to and if you can scale it quite well in terms of, having the right relationships and, being able to engage with those vendors, then you can make a pretty decent buck doing that. So that's how I would get started. Look at like Soundstripe, look at Epidemic Sound, look at those guys and reach out to them and see what their process is and submit for it. On the label side, ADA through Warner, the Orchard through Sony, Caroline Distribution through UMG or In Groups, which is very popular under UMG. Those all have connections to the sync licensing placements, though I will tell you it is a lot of relationship-based work. So just you'll have to put in some networking hours in order to get it to the right audience. Yeah. Eric, I don't know if you have anything.
Yeah, just to speak on that. So when I worked at the WWE, I was basically an in-house supervisor for wrestling. And the way it worked was, we actually answered to the head of TV, and they were in a way almost like the director, and Vince McMahon was like the producer, right? So Vince and him would get together, they would write the script, and then they would figure out like how they wanted to film it, shoot it, and how the music defined it. They would come down to us. We would build a Dropbox out of like 20 songs, highlight our top 5, and then, they would either say yes or no and go try to clear it. The way we would really search, definitely relationship based for sure. We were also just combing like Spotify, like New Music Friday, like honestly, New Music Friday, Roots, all those different playlists that are high performance. Obviously a bigger brand, bigger tier. But that's how we did it generally. I definitely agree. Like Epidemic, Artlist, Soundstripe, those are good, like music libraries. You can definitely get in there a little earlier. One thing I'll just make note of, I had some experience and some success, give or take. IMDb Pro, I've actually signed up for like a monthly subscription, and you can search, they have like a discovery area, and you can actually search directors and producers, and there's all email addresses and contacts for like production houses, directors. I was working with a Norwegian artist about a year ago, and sent out about 15 emails, I would say, and we got 5 responses, which in the music business is not bad. It's not terrible, and I built some relationships there, and that could be a good way as well. It was like a $20, $25 a month fee, and built some relationships through that. So just kind of a tip and a different way to look at it. You could build some, relationships, and I agree, LinkedIn as well, just like finding out who the supervisors are, DMing them, messaging them, building your contact list for sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, that's great, Eric. Thank you. Another question we got here in the chat was from Childs. He said, What would you say the problem with an artist that put in the 10,000 hours, got the look, lengthy music catalog, great music reviews, but hasn't connected to the communities or has low views? Chuds, where are you located? Like, where in the world?
Virginia.
Okay,
Okay.
cool. So this is great question. And I do actually get this question quite often, even in New York. Every city in the country has a music scene. It's there's some that are not that big, but Eric and I have the pleasure of living in New York City, which is one of the biggest in the world, if not the biggest. So I would say do the same thing that you would do in New York City or LA or Nashville that you would do in Washington, D.C. or Richmond, Virginia. First off, Richmond has a great music scene. We have artists. I have a couple of artists that travel down to Richmond, Virginia, or like Fredericksburg to perform. If you are in a small town, oftentimes college towns can have great music scenes, and the music programs at colleges can be really open to helping you see your full potential and connecting with folks. A great example of this is like Maggie Rogers. When she was in Annapolis, she connected with some local institutions in Annapolis, and they really helped her to get connected to Pharrell's songwriting camp. So you can do it that way. Second, just go to the nearest big city. So like if you're close to like Richmond, they have a great music scene. There's a lot of people that travel between Richmond and New York. There's a lot of banking that happens in Richmond because of the Federal Reserve that brings a lot of people from New York City. And that can be a great way to then figure out what your next steps are in terms of traveling to Brooklyn from Richmond. I'm from Washington, D.C. We have a very, very vibrant music scene. IMP Promotions, which is the biggest concert promoter in Washington, D.C., is actually the biggest independent concert promoter in the country, and it's still one of the last remaining independent promoters outside of, that hasn't been scooped up by Live Nation. So
What's their name again?
It's called IMP Presents, and if you email me, I can link you. They are great. And if you go to any of their music venues, not only do they have amazing shows, but they're also like really open to connect. A lot of local promoters, their role is to sign and perform and promote and distribute new music. So they are always looking for musicians. Obviously there's no guarantee of a relationship, but it is a great way to get started and connect with them. And then, if you're in a big city, like there is bound to be a music establishment. I will say one of the key pieces that I would put about big cities is that I think you can get lost very easily in the music scene. This is particularly true in Los Angeles or New York or London or Nashville. So there's also the flip side too. Like there are artists that are maybe from rural areas, like yourself, Childs, where like, you're looking for that scene to get connected in, and it's just about maybe connecting with the nearest big city or going to your local college or university. And then there's the flip side. There's like living in New York City or LA and London, where you're like, there's too many communities, there's too many things going on. How do I know where to pick? And that's really just about, knowing who you are, what kind of music you want to do, and recognizing that your music, taste will change. Like the musician you are today may not necessarily be the musician you are tomorrow, and that may be reflected. So I'm also just going to kind of hit up some of these quick questions. Oh, yep, go for it. Oh, yeah, definitely, Childs. Yeah, and feel free to email me if you have any questions. Can you elaborate on the length of today's standard, like the song should be less than 3 to 4 minutes? I'm talking about Spotify and today's audience that skip a song after 5 seconds. New reality that is really forcing musicians to comply in a way because people don't listen to albums anymore. I have a very controversial opinion about this. I'll try to summarize it as quickly as I can. Great music will never be skipped. What do I mean by that? If the music is really good, nobody's skipping that music. I do think the standard is probably 3 minutes and 15 seconds. There's been a lot of research across the board to showcase that's about as long as a full human's attention for a single song. if you're finding that people are like skipping through your music or aren't listening to the full 30 seconds for a royalty bearing stream, um, I would want to understand why and how we can improve that. So there are a lot of great artists today that are emerging that nobody's even heard of, where I am listening to their songs through and through. I'm listening to full 3 minutes and 15 seconds, and I'm listening to that on rotate. Great music will never be skipped. I think, if you are finding that music is being skipped too frequently, revisit your production strategy and think through maybe some creative ways to add new content, or if you have a new album, maybe take that feedback into consideration, because I do genuinely believe great music will never be skipped. This is from Brendan Theaters. As a new label, in your opinion, is it better to broadly sign music or stay focused to what I feel is good within the specific genre I was to be known for? This is a fantastic question. I'm going to just shorten a quick anecdote to talk a little bit about this. So when we first started the Orchard, we just grew too quickly, too fast. I mean, it was the pandemic. I really didn't have much going on. I was playing my guitar, I was working, and I was going to school part-time for my grad program. And I just really wanted to be in music. I wanted to feel connected. I wanted to talk to people. I wanted to show that we were building something, that we were creating something, that we were showing value to the Orchard. And don't get me wrong, we were able to get a couple of artists to make some pretty significant streaming headway, but we just broadly signed music. And eventually that strategy works from the get-go, but eventually it will come back to bite you. Eventually people start to be why did this label start to sign this music? Or they'll start to be this music has no bearing on this label's identity. Or you'll update your marketing materials and people will be this roster has no alignment with what you're supposed to be doing, what this label is supposed to be doing. And it will start to kind of feel like you just sort of signed the first thing that came to you without really having a full understanding of what your label really is about and what it's trying to accomplish. And so I think the first things is, one, figure out what your community is and how to lean on that. Oftentimes community helps you to figure out what your direction is. And if you can define what your community is, then you're able to define what your sound is, and then you can sign artists based on that sound. Second is figure out what type of production value you want. Are you mostly a live label and you do a lot of live shows? In that case, you want artists that are going to be good live, whether or not they stream well. If you're more of a label that doesn't focus as much on live, then perhaps you want more artists that do have a bit more of an electronic sound that's more better streamed on DSPs, but may not necessarily be played live. So I think it just really depends on what you want to do as a label. And certainly if you have specific questions, you can always feel free to email me and we can work it out. And I, if you're local to New York, I'm happy to meet up for coffee and we can talk more about it.
Appreciate the feedback. I'm actually based in Las Vegas.
Oh, there you go. Well, perfect. Also, sometimes the location can also be really helpful too. So, for example, in New York or LA or London, where you're going to find all types of music, you can you have the luxury, obviously, of picking and choosing. In Las Vegas, I actually ran a record label in Las Vegas many years ago. We tried to do live music. It just didn't work. Las Vegas's primary export is electronic music. So sometimes your location can really give you an idea of what type of music you want to work on. So that's also an easy way of trying to figure out who you are and who to sign.
So final follow-up question. What I'm finding is and maybe this is a good thing, I'm still working through it, but I find myself very particular about the production quality, how the song progresses, The genre, of course, I'm at least starting off as a electronic dance music label. And I'm having a hard time thinking about, well, it's not necessarily what I would like, but what people in general would like, right? And so I find myself going back and forth between those two things. Like, okay, I might not like this, but there's plenty of music out there that I don't like that other people love. So should I be signing those tracks as well?
I think it's a balance. I would maybe budget 50-50 is a good rule always. 50% commercial tracks, 50% tracks you love. In an ideal world, like the tracks that you would 100% of the tracks that you would sign would be tracks that you would love. But as you said, like when you're first, starting out, you do want to have tracks that are commercially viable versus tracks that don't. We have a lot of great tracks. We have a lot of artists on our label that have great streaming numbers that sign with a number of different labels. And, their tracks, some of them, their tracks are high volume and some of them aren't. But just because they aren't streaming a high volume doesn't mean I don't love their music, and also doesn't mean that they're great performers. We have a couple of artists on our label that are extremely talented performers. They just don't release that much music. And I like watching them and I like listening to them. So, I'm going to keep supporting and signing them.
Cool. Thanks, man.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a balance. I think the one thing that's interesting, and you kind of touched upon it earlier, where Gen Z doesn't really care about genres anymore. I mean, historically, though, a label always kind of defined a certain sound or a certain taste. So I think as a label owner, there is still that importance of like you kind of setting the pulse and you putting your fingerprint on the sound. So don't be afraid to sign things that you genuinely like and believe in as well, because I think sometimes the public hasn't caught up. Like if you're already chasing a trend, it probably already happened. So I think that's something to really think about. It might seem commercial, but it's commercial because it's currently happening. And again, back to Seymour, like he went down to the Bowery and signed all these punk bands, and no one wanted to go down there and touch it. And then that started this whole new wave movement, and he was at the forefront of that.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Eric. It's such a good point that Eric brings up. Like literally, your greatest asset as a label is figuring out what people aren't signing and sign that. I can't stress enough. Like I get so much feedback from across this industry of people that are like, why did you sign that artist? Why did you work with these people? Why did you do this thing? And I'm like, because that thing that I signed or that show that I'm putting on, that is the future of this industry. When I look at the trends, when I look at what people are writing about, when I see what's on the horizon, like that's on the horizon. And so it's such a great point that Eric brings up. It's like your job as a label actually isn't to sign what everybody else signs, but actually to sign what nobody will sign. That's what kind of makes it fun. Like we wouldn't be in this industry, Eric and I, if we didn't want to chase whatever that next new thing is that's coming. And that's like part of the chase. Like, I have friends, they chase crypto. I have friends, they chase real estate. My chase is to find the next great Taylor Swift, the next great Dua Lipa. And to do that, just like the crypto guys, just like the real estate guys, you have to think ahead. Or the VCs, you have to think 2 steps ahead. You have to be like, okay, I'm hearing something and this is so weird that I kind of want to sign it because I think this might be the future. And that's how you have to think if you really want to be successful. Last question here from Russell Smith. I'll be submitting a new campaign on Groover. What curators should I target? Labels, publishers, folks looking to collaborate, or to focus? All the above. Thanks for the help. Great question. So I've been kind of struggling with this on Groover, and I know this is a webinar, sort of, talking about Groover Club. So when I respond to artists, like I do have to look now. Our label, when we initially started with Groover, we were happy to take everybody from everywhere, because like the music was, if the music was really good, the streaming numbers were really good, then I wasn't too particular about where they were located. In recent years, since we do a lot of live events, and I really like to sign artists or work with artists that promote live, it's really important that they're in the tri-state area, or that they can accessibly get to New York, where Eric and I are based. So I feel really bad saying this, but like a lot of times I will respond to submissions being like, I really love your music and I would really love to work with you and be a mentor to you, but like we can't sign you or like really support you just because like you're not located in our specific location. So I think when you're looking at targeting curators, right now, community building and live is really important. And if that's a trend you want to be on top of, then you really want to look at like the location and the geography. You also want to look at specific genres. I love, one of my favorite things about Groover is I love when somebody will like send me like an EDM track and be like, this is Motown. And I'll be like, this is not Motown, but okay, good try. Believe it or not, the filters actually do work. Like,
Yep.
I really do think that you need to like think through your filters, because as on the other side, on the curation side, or I guess the curator side, like we use those filters a lot. Like, and if I have like an EDM track that's like trap music, that's Motown, it's like, I get why you did the Motown. It's because of the saxophone, but like this entire record is not Motown.
Right.
So I think that's like a big piece. The more efficient you can use the filters, the more the labels and publishers are then able to get back to you, able to really respond in a meaningful way, and able to get you the service that you want. For labels and publishers, so publishers, I think, just like what we talked about with like having a clear vision on the sync licensing side and really understanding like what type of music you're trying to get licensed and how, that can really help a publisher. If they have a clear idea of what you actually want to do with the record from a licensing or pub perspective, then they're much better able to respond. And then labels. So one thing that I am even guilty of as a record label, labels don't always keep their descriptions up to date, which can be really hard for you guys. I know it does kind of suck sometimes because you're submitting, you're like, I don't get it. Like, this label says that they do this. No, they don't. So one thing I would do in that case. So if it's a label where you're like, I kind of just submitted to this label, I don't really care much about them, but I had some extra credits, so I'm going to submit to them. Just come back with a new record, or like keep sending them stuff, promoting on the platform. That's fine. Like, us labels will sift through that stuff. We'll oftentimes see something we like, and then we'll reach out. If it's a label you actually do really like, email them. Totally email them, reach out on social media. Because oftentimes, like, some labels will just not have updated descriptions, and it's kind of like a guessing game. And if you email them, then they're much more apt to be like, now I see what you're trying to do with this, and yes, we're a good fit, or no, we're not. So if you find a label that you really like, submit to them. But if they're not getting back to you, but you would want to work with them, just email them. They would definitely, I think, following up with them, they'll be able to give you a clearer idea of what they're looking for, and that's a better fit. I hope that's helpful. I don't know if that's helpful. So
Totally agree. I think also, because I'm a curator as well, sometimes I don't see a description, and I think that's challenging sometimes because I like to know some background info, and I don't really, in a submission, want to do a lot of extra research. I already do that a lot, on my own, of artists that I'm trying to find and sign and stuff. So I think if you have a clearly defined bio, or just like an update, like, hey, this is my next track coming out, or I have an EP coming out, that in the genres I see a lot of they're mismatched or not completed for the most part, and I think that's really helpful and useful for curators to know that and see that.
yeah, it's interesting, Eric. I also wonder, maybe it's something me and Dorian, when he comes to New York, we can sit down and talk over coffee or something. That's like,
Yeah,
I almost wonder if a great way to improve the platform is actually to make it a little bit easier for curators to update their information, because I do actually see this as a bigger pain point on the submission side than on the curator side. So it's interesting you guys are kind of getting both perspectives on this Groover Club call. Like on the curator side, right? You have to think that like even though Groover is a huge part of our value proposition, it is also just one element of the value proposition. So if you feel like you're hitting a roadblock, I used to deal with this with Jason all the time from Submit Hub. It's like if you feel that you're hitting a roadblock, it's not you. Like it's not you as the artist.
Yeah.
Like 9 times out of 10 is just that like the curator is like they need to figure out their recording times, or they have a couple of projects they're working on, or they're working on a big tour, or they're in the middle of a rebrand. And it's like, it's not that you're not a priority. It's just that you're not a priority at the moment in which you reach out to them. So my thought process is that sometimes like curators, they should, in a perfect world, be updating, maintaining their content on Groover and other related platforms, but they just don't, because it's just one part of their strategy. So if you think about it in that context, I hope that makes it a little bit more, like provides a little bit more empathy on both sides. I've had some submissions on Submit Hub and Label Radar, even 1 or 2 on Groover, not as bad on Groover, but where people just like rail into our label. And it's like, we're not saying that your music isn't good. We're not even saying that we won't sign the music. We're just saying like the way that it's been presented now is just not, it's not available for us to do anything with. It doesn't mean that it won't be in the future. It just means right now. And so as a as a submitter, you're like, okay, well, then I'm not going to resubmit to you, or like, why should I keep resubmitting to you? And it's like, well, that's a good point. Maybe the way to do it is just to re-engage at a later point when you know you have something. If you have something that you know is a good fit, but a curator immediately rejects it, what I would say is, one, Groover does a really good job of saying, hey, like as a curator, I'm not going to accept this submission, but I might just leave feedback. So then it's like, okay, well, at least I got some feedback from them, even if they didn't sign it. But 2, it's also a good indication that like they actually do care. Like I know every label says this, and I get that it sounds like beating a rock in a hard place, but like we do listen to every single submission that comes in. Like I literally sit here and listen to them. So when you get an email from me, it's not that like, it's not some boilerplate response. Like I've listened to your submission. It just doesn't fit us at the moment, but it doesn't mean that it's a closed door. And I think that's really important. One of my greatest strengths in this industry was following up. And I really encourage all of my artists to do that. Follow up. Particularly in this world where like people are more disconnected than ever, like you following up is gonna have is not only going to be beneficial for you, but it's going to establish that relationship. That label is going to get back to you. That A&R will get back to you, and at some point, that label or that A&R will reach out to you and will be like, "Hey, this is the right opportunity." And then it's kind of cool because then you get to decide, hey, like I'm the big fish now. Like, do I make the decision or not? But to do that, you have to kind of get there. We deal with this all the time with like live events. I go to so many shows in New York City, or like deal with so many live promoters. And oftentimes like we never, they never accept our live submissions. Well, now increasingly they do, but for a long time they didn't. But we kept going to their events. We kept following up. We kept saying hello. And eventually they were like, hey, like I need this DJ, or hey, I need this live band, or hey, I need this record label. And we were their first call. So I hope that brings a little bit of empathy. You're not being rejected. They're just telling you that like right now they have a list of 10 priorities, and the music or the genre or the mood that you're trying to promote just isn't on their list of priorities, it doesn't mean that it's never going to be on your list of priorities. In 6 months, that might change. So just stay in touch with them, encourage them to follow up, get on their mailing list, follow them on social media, interact with them. They will see it and they will respond. When the time is right, they'll reach out and put you in the driver's seat.
Totally. So true. Yeah. And I've even seen that on like the major label side. So I was in Finland once and saw this band that I really liked, but the lead front woman kind of reminded me of like Regina Spektor meets Lights. We actually had that band on, two of those artists on Sire. So I was like, probably doesn't make sense to sign this artist, right? Stayed in touch with the manager, developed a really good relationship. Probably about a year, 8 months later, he had this other band that he was working with, and I really liked it, but it wasn't the right time. There was still some work to be done. Kept following along, kept staying in touch. They won a European Border Breakers Award at Eurosonic, which was, a big thing. Like Adele, Mumford & Sons won that in the past. They won a Skype Go Change the World Award, and there were all these accolades that were building. So for me as an A&R, it was easier to go to my superiors to say, hey, this is a great band. The songs are great, but now the world is recognizing them too, right? Key music industry events, they're winning awards from there. Skype is a huge company. Go Change the World Award. I end up signing them, but it was over the course of 8 months to a year that I built that relationship with the manager. And I wouldn't call him relentless because I had some interest in some of his artists, but we just developed that relationship and stayed in contact. And he kept me first for the band and stuff as they were building. Other labels were reaching out, but it worked out. I ended up signing him then. So
yeah, I agree. It's one of the biggest, I think, lessons that I can impart like from this webinar is, I personally, that I also sort of observe as a record label owner and as somebody who works for an international organization, that like our world is getting like more fractionalized, and as a result, I think people are less willing to kind of like build those relationships and more willing to sort of close the door very quickly. And music is not a short-term game. It's a very long-term game. And you're going to have a lot of bumps and challenges and ups and downs in your career. And the people that will come and help you grow in this career are the people that you stay in contact with, whether or not they decide to pull the trigger. But you as an individual, whether you're a label, an artist, a publisher, you have so much more control over that relationship than you realize, just simply in the way that you follow up. Like, you following up increases your risk of being signed by like 80%. Like I don't have them off the top of my head, but I'll get them for you guys in the summary email. Like, there is some ridiculous statistic out there that like if you were to follow up once or twice, like it would increase your chances of like a label meeting or an opportunity here or something by like 70 or 80%, and that's just like one follow-up. So I think by doing that, that's what really differentiates the great artist from those that just kind of fade out. Yeah.
Completely agree. Yeah. Great point.
So I don't see that we have any more questions. I just really wanted to say thank you. It's so cool to get the opportunity to chat with you guys. Yeah, I think, in part, I'm happy to help and happy to provide coaching, mentorship. For me, I'm just doing it for the love of the music. I think, we all just really strive to do that. Do we make $1 million every year? No. Do we have some good years financially? Yes. Do we have some bad years financially? Absolutely. Ultimately, we are really about trying to connect with artists. And one thing I will offer up there is increasingly, I found a lot of value in helping to manage and coach and consult with artists rather than just signing them. It is a big, heavy lift to be able to sign an artist. And as we talked about here in this webinar, like a lot of factors have to go into play in order to make that call. But what doesn't have to go into play is like asking, setting up a time to do coffee or a virtual chat or texting me or giving me a call or asking questions. That is something that I can absolutely 100% do. And also something that will allow us to stay in contact and help you grow with your music, even if we can't give you some massive advance and like help blow up your record. So, yeah.
Love that. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean, that's what it's all about. Like, you're in a position to help artists and, provide that information. I think that's the biggest thing in the education. That's why I, really wanted to be a part of Groover, coming from the major labels and stuff, because, it's a very closed door kind of environment, and a lot of it's perception or misinformation and stuff. So I just wanted to share that with artists, and that's why I got out here to do what I do. So it's great to have like-minded, folks like you and great partners to Groover. So we're grateful, for this webinar and just the relationship in general going forward.
Yeah, 100%. Same here. And we're excited. The last plug I'll give, and Eric, you and I can talk offline with Apolline about this. Maybe we should sit down, but we will have a songwriting camp coming up probably this fall. And, by virtue of us all being on the call together, I would like to extend an invite to all of you guys to submit and, and definitely be considered for it. We would love to have you. We are most likely going to be partnering with some really key folks across many of the major academic institutions. We have some great studios involved. We'll have some fantastic former A&Rs as well as current A&Rs involved. So I'm really excited about this next one. Our first one was really great, and I would encourage all of you to apply once we connect and kind of get things on Groover, and be a part of this growing community that we're building in New York. So yeah,
super cool. Yeah, we should definitely talk about that offline, and that's great. Thank you for the invite to everyone who joined and stuff. That's huge. So yeah. I'm sure they really appreciate it. We do. So thank you.
Definitely.
Super cool. Yeah, of course. All right, guys. Well, I guess that concludes the Groover webinar. So I appreciate, everyone joining. Hopefully you guys got a lot out of it. We both provided our emails, so feel free to reach out. Looking forward to more. Hopefully we'll see some of you in the Groover Club, and have a great day, guys.
Thanks, guys.
I'm going to just stop the recording. I think that ended it.